So what can we use a market to analyze? Now, of course, in the book, it's always going to be, I don't know, eggs and lemons and Maseratis and all sorts of things like that, which economists find, okay, it's great for textbooks, but deadly dull. No one will want to read them unless you're actually, and no one seems to enjoy them unless you're actually writing a textbook. So I'm going to talk about the market for Chinese grooms. This is just a model. It's a tool for thinking about the world. Economists say, if you're an economist, what you say is, use that tool on everything. Economics explains everything that possibly happens. Right? The economists are going to say, yeah. So of course it explained the market for Chinese grooms. Now, of course, the psychologists will say, well, that's all wrong. And anthropologists say, no, that's totally wrong. And the sociologists will disagree as well. Political scientists think the economists are all idiots. There's no rational consumers. Everyone's got problems and neuroses. But look, this is just one particular way of viewing the world. And this is how an economist would try to understand something like the market for Chinese grooms. Okay, I could just as easily call this the market for Chinese brides, but since you actually, in a sense, pay for grooms, and I'll show you what that means, I'm going to call it the market for Chinese grooms. What's the quantity going to be here in a market for Chinese grooms? What do you use a groom for? Opening jars, reaching tall things on shelves. Right. Grooms, we're thinking about sort of a marriage market. Right? There's brides and there's grooms and there's matching between the two. China has one bride, one groom, just like Australia does. And there's matching between brides and grooms. And in the sense that you'll have the quantity here will be the number of grooms who get married. Demand, in this case, who demands Chinese grooms? Chinese brides, exactly. What's the supply of Chinese grooms is just the number of eligible bachelors out there. So we're going to use economics to try to explain marriage markets and what's going on there. Quantity here is the number of grooms who are married. And the price here is, I'm going to tell you, is what's called a dowry or a dower. Okay, so in most societies, traditional China and in the West, the bride's family paid a dowry to the groom's family for taking the bride off their hands. Yeah, that's what happened. You can tell that why. We still do it here, especially in traditional parts of Australia. The bride's family pays for the wedding. That is a reflection of the old dowry practice. What is the bride bringing? Well, the bride's bringing $40,000 to pay for a really nice wedding. In the old days, a bride would bring, in the US, they used to have what's called a dowry chest, which was a chest, maybe the size of this table, and that would be full of linens and cups and crockery and, cutlery and curtains and fabrics and clothes, and that would be, in a sense, the bride's family's contribution to the marriage. So that's called a dowry. In lots of places also, it was done by handing over money. And so what we call a dowry is when the family, the bride's family pays to get rid of the bride. And when the opposite happens, when the groom's family is paying to get the bride, it's called a bride price or a dower. Right? So a dowry is like a negative price for a bride or a positive price for the groom. Think about it the other way. The bride's family is paying for a groom. And better grooms will cost more. The bride price is the opposite. You're paying for a bride. And better prices are commanded by better quality brides. However, you define quality in this case. So what determines dowry or dowry? And can economics help us try to understand what's going on? Okay. So, traditionally, all these notions about love and, had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with marriage. Marriage was about families, and mostly it was about property. If you wanted to, combine farms and one family here and one family there, well, they'd marry their sons and their daughters together, and then the two farms would be combined. So traditionally, love has had nothing to do with marriage. Most marriages were arranged, and they're arranged by the families. So if you're trying to understand dowry and dower, don't think about the bride and groom, because it's got nothing to do with them. This was negotiations between the bride's mother and the groom's mother about who's got money, where, how much. Right? So this is what marriages were traditionally about. So the economist would say, well, a dower or dowry is telling you something about the net value of a bride or a groom to the families. So the families have an asset. That's this person. And they either lose this person or gain another person. So they have to think about the exchange of the assets. Traditionally, the bride went over to the groom's family. So what would tend to happen is the bride then moves into the groom's house. If you go to the Middle East, it still happens. Most people live in compounds. The bride will move into the groom's residence in a multi-generational big compound. Right? So, in a sense, when you marry off your daughter, you really marry off your daughter. She disappears. So there's lots of other traditions, like in Mongol marriage ceremonies, the groom sweeps in on a horse, grabs the wife, and he's supposed to ride off on a horse with the wife. Essentially, it's sort of an imagined theft. But it is. You lose your daughter. Your daughter then moves into the groom's hut, and that's it. You've lost your daughter, as on the other side, you've gained a daughter by your son marrying one. So in polygamous societies, we tend to see a bride price. So in polygamous societies, women tend to be very highly valued, and people have to pay money to who? Who do you pay money to get a bride? Do you pay it to the bride? Now, has anyone been listening? Do you pay the money to the bride to get the valuable bride? The answer is, of course the hell not. Who do you pay the money to? You pay it to the parents. You give it to the dad. It depends what type of wedding and how many, camels or sheep or goats but yes, in most societies, yeah, it is exactly like this. What you got to realize is the West is weird. We in the West are weird. The stuff we have, we've only recently invented, and we were a lot less weird 200, 300, 400 years ago when dowry existed in Western societies. In monogamous societies, you tend to see dowry as opposed to polygamous societies, right? Polygamous means one man, many wives. Monogamous means one man, one wife. What's the other one? What's many husbands, one wife? Doesn't matter, you almost never see it. Right? Completely theoretical. I don't think there are actually any societies in which that's worked for very long. In patrilineal societies as well, patrilineal means the assets passed down to the sons, on the son's side of things. In patrilineal societies, you tend to see dowry as well.